we need to fight back without gloves and bring out the lawful knuckles. First, identify the threat, and let's be honest, it's not the stupid Klan with their burning crosses and their white sheets. It is the pro-Palestinian and Islamist crowd in chic clothing adorned with keffiyehs and their useful idiots who march behind them.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the Books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Welcome to the Edwin Black Show, coming to you every other week from Washington, D.C. Yes, it's our 6th season. Thank you for your loyal attention and your support as we traverse the flames of history and their reignition before our very eyes. We open today with a prayer for all our friends in the Los Angeles area who have been afflicted with flames and fires. And we pray for our hostages that they may come back. We pray for total victory by the IDF over evil. And we pray for wisdom and success for the administration of Donald Trump. Hello, I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and author of 225 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide, including IBM and the Holocaust, War Against the Weak, and the Farhud, as well as many other books. This is a show for opinion makers and decision makers, not mass clicks. So if you think our show's content is meaningful, spread the word through your most informed networks. Subscribe for free alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, we need your assistance. Please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. The New Year giving is now. So go to theedwinblackshow.com/support and keep us independent. Today's episode is made possible and sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by members of the medical community of Metro Washington, D.C., and co-sponsored by two vital works, The Multi-Front War by Kenneth Abramowitz and Values That Shape the World by Faye Lincoln. If you would like to honor someone with a sponsorship, contact us. That said, remember, I only speak for myself and for history, and the same goes for my guests. Today, we welcome viewers from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the Villages, Newton, Mass., Chicago, and Tampa Bay, right along the Gulf of America. Overseas, I see viewers logged on from most of our usuals. That includes Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Austria again, Holland, Sweden, France, Italy, Spain, Hungary, that's going to be important, Japan, Great Britain, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, and Israel, plus other countries. If you have a question, place one short sentence in Zoom's QA feature. The Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, is global and fast-growing, enjoying many scores of thousands of views. We speak frankly and without tremor to a fragmented world, seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present, very, very tense, and a turbulent future, still uncertain. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. Today we speak of history, but only as a terrifying warning of what is about to come. October 13th, 2022, I began a series that I called Kristallnacht 2.0, warning the world that the monstrosities of the Holocaust would reemerge in the coming times. Back then, people thought that I was an alarmist, outlandish, far-fetched. Nonetheless, I pressed ahead with 2 of the most informed voices on the planet, Yossie Hollander, a global leader in Holocaust education, and America's premier civil rights and Jewish defense attorney, Nathan Lewin. Since then, we have done 4 follow-up episodes. This is our 5th, and each time the awful implications of a Kristallnacht 2.0 became more and more undeniable, and currently they are confirmable. At the same time, I predicted we would see another Farhud pogrom, but this time in Israel or the United States. Then came October 7th, and with it, an explosion of global anti-Semitism, and in all the most enlightened places, such as New York, Montreal, London, and Sydney. Today, virtually all knowing Jewish defense leaders whose job it is to know concede that today, world Jewry teeters on the jagged precipice of another global outrage of persecution, violence, disenfranchisement, and even escape or expulsion. The painful realization has set in that I was right, even as I pleaded with the world to ensure that I was wrong. I keep demanding to be wrong, but the warnings come true. We must admit that from time to time, somewhat regularly, the world has a tendency to go mad. And recorded history is the medical chart of that illness, how it happened and why it happened. I read the medical charts of history and anti-Semitism the way doctors read the medical charts of their stricken patients. So again, I plead with the world, do humanity a favor and prove me wrong. Now, I'm the first to admit that the dispossession of the Jews I feared that would visit America if the Democrats, dominated by Jew hatred and Israel hatred, if the Democrats would win. But the nation chose to go a different way, to not descend the path of destruction. 90% of the counties in America voted for Trump. Plus, they gave him majorities in the House and Senate, delivering a historic win. And so the train has been derailed in the United States. And soon we shall see the mighty hand sweep against the evil of Jew hatred in our country, as we have seen play out on our campuses and in anti-Jewish and anti-Israel efforts in the Biden administration, which is still infused with embedded Jew hatred and anti-Israel bias. For now, Jews are safe in America, for now. But Jews in other countries are today scrambling to flee, afraid to go to their synagogues where anti-Jewish mobs regularly assemble, such as in London, where, according to Rabbi Lehrer of the Central Synagogue, quote, events have been canceled and worshipers are afraid to come to prayers. Britain's chief rabbi, Ephraim Mervis, characterized the situation as, quote, a critical moment. And he criticizes the police for failing to protect, quote, members of the Jewish community who no longer feel safe walking to and from their synagogues on the Sabbath, or in front of the New York Tisch Hospital in Manhattan, where many Jewish patients and Jewish doctors can easily be found, and where a threatening, cursing mob on Monday assembled to demand, quote, Israel be abolished, as they chanted over and over again, we don't want no Zionists here. That's a quote. The violent and hateful rhetoric we have seen also in Montreal is a, quote, chilling symptom of an escalating crisis, according to Canadian Jewish Defense Group there. Chants of death to the Jews, I'm quoting them, violent targeting of Jewish institutions, and the glorification of terrorist groups on Canadian streets represent a direct threat not only to Canada's Jewish community, but also to the values that define the Canadian country. The time is over for talk. Canadians must act decisively to combat this growing wave of hate. And in Montreal, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs has just declared that, quote, since October 7th, Canada's Jewish community has faced an unprecedented surge in anti-Semitic violence. Jewish schools have been shot at, businesses vandalized, and synagogues forced to implement extraordinary security measures to protect worshipers. Flags of terrorist organizations designated as such under Canadian law are brandished on our streets. I'm still quoting. Public demonstrations have echoed chilling calls for the, quote, extermination of the Jews. In Canada, I should say, the overwhelming majority of Jewish doctors fear for their patients and everywhere, Jewish Canadians are looking for an exit strategy, a place to go. I don't need to continue. The reality is no longer deniable. Even a liberal and progressive mainstreamer such as Jonathan Greenblatt, head of the Anti-Defamation League, admitted in his recent Knesset statement, quote, the ADL and the rest of the NGO sector in the United States and around the world, we've got to start doing things differently. I'm quoting, and the same goes here in Israel. This means that the problem won't be solved by yet another Knesset task force. It won't be solved by the government just throwing money at the problem. It won't be solved by the IDF spokesman's unit issuing updated talking points or suddenly using TikTok. Like us in America, you in Israel need to adopt new strategies to experiment with creative tactics and then scale what works. That's a quote. Yes, I say world Jewry is facing another Kristallnacht, another Farhud, as we saw in Dagestan and Amsterdam, and has been fermenting toxically in so many other places. Those ignition switches will undoubtedly presage something much worse, much, much worse. Jabotinsky foretold of the coming calamity, and now I pick up that torch and share its frightening illumination with you. Yes, we must commemorate, we must educate, but we must litigate, and fight back. Today, we will talk about real ideas to fight back. So I start by bringing you one of the planet's most decisive international jurists in the cause of Jewish defense. I give you Richard Heideman in Washington. Richard, update us on the legal front.
Thank you, Edwin, and hello to everyone. The legal update really needs a historical overview in the context that Edwin just indicated, but I'm not going to go way back. I'm only going to go back to 2003, 22 years ago, when the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution referring to the International Court of Justice, Israel, to be examined as to the question as to the legality of Israel's construction of what they refer to as the wall. The wall, now the apartheid wall. That was a fence, is a fence designed to fence out the terrorists. But the International Court of Justice, even though Israel's courts were seized of the issues, they decided in July of 2004 that Israel was in violation of international law. And that mantra has been picked up by every court all over in the international sphere, even in the United States. It has gone further, with the UN referring again in 2022 Israel for an additional question to the International Court of Justice. And again, the International Court of Justice has continued to hit Israel. And just this week, we saw Ireland join South Africa in the attempt at the International Court of Justice to label Israel in violation of committing genocide. Let's move over to the International Criminal Court. Israel's not a member, not a signatory to that court, yet the prosecutor requested warrants for Prime Minister Netanyahu and then Defense Minister Gallant on the issue of Israel involved in Gaza. That matter went to the pretrial chamber, and the pretrial chamber authorized the warrants to be issued. Those warrants essentially threaten Prime Minister Netanyahu, they threaten former Defense Minister Gallant, but now we're seeing IDF soldiers threatened in countries around the world. The fact of the matter is, a country like France has announced they're not going to enforce the warrants because they say Israel has immunity. And they're right. Israel does have immunity because it's not a signatory. Poland says, however, that they will enforce the warrants. And just in the last 24 hours, President Duda of Poland, who I consider to be a really terrific friend of Israel and the Jewish community, President Duda said Prime Minister Netanyahu should be able to come to Poland for the 80th commemoration of the liberation liberation of the concentration camps, and he should have immunity. We'll see how that plays out, because as of now, both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Herzog have declined to go to Poland in light of their position. But let's shift over in that context to the United States Senate. Led by Senator Graham and others, the U.S. Senate has introduced legislation to issue sanctions against the International Criminal Court, its prosecutor, and others for having taken on Israel in this dastardly way. And we'll see how that rolls out. Number 3, UNRWA. UNRWA is an arm of the United Nations. It's called the Relief Works Agency. It was created following the creation of the State of Israel. You already know that UNRWA counts 5.2 million Palestinians as heirs covered under UNRWA. And UNRWA has been sued in federal court in New York by law firms that we know of and have great respect for and have cooperated with. And those law firms were shocked to find the Biden Justice Department to file what's called a statement of interest. That statement of interest says that UNRWA should have immunity. That is rubbish, and that has to be taken apart, and lawyers around the world are working on taking that apart. Let's move over lastly to the issue not of terror that I usually talk about, or terror litigation, but what I'm going to call the approach that I advocated many years ago. Yossie Hollander will remember me talking about taking a zero-tolerance policy against anti-Semitism, against anti-Zionism, against anti-Israelism. And I observed then and I observe today that unless we lawyers around the world stand up in our communities, in our legislatures, in our houses of government, in the court of public opinion, and in the courts, we will not defeat this assault on Israel and the Jewish people around the world. People like Nathan Lewin at the Brandeis Center are leading the way in filing impactful and important lawsuits that are showing results for civil rights violations of universities that have not been taking care of and protecting the Jewish students on campus. And case after case is getting resolved, and we'll see over time if the cumulative effect can make a difference. It has to make a difference because it's part of a larger plan. We have to remember that at the Durban conference almost 25 years ago, they planted a program, they adopted a program that had a multi-pronged strategy against Israel. It's terror, it's war, it's diplomatic, it's academic boycott, it's economic boycott, and it's been growing and getting great acceptance. I conclude with this. Legislation is a key, litigation is a key. Legislation. The IRA definition wasn't adopted by Congress in the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act because it was stopped. Let's have a new day in politics. Let's get done the business of the country, the business of the world. Let's protect the Jewish community like we protect every other community. And lastly, let's adopt legislation that will truly allow lawyers like our firm and others, and Nat Lewin and Lisa and so many others, to go after the perpetrators, the funders, the sponsors, the founders, those who feed not just the demonstration, the free speech demonstrations, but who feed the hatred, who teach the hatred. They can't have the First Amendment protection they want when they are spewing hatred. It is discriminatory. We have to put a stop to it. Congress can play a role. We're expecting and hoping and praying and supporting the Trump administration because we believe a new day is upon us. We have an opportunity, certainly between now and the midterm elections. We have the opportunity to make a difference through Congress, through the White House, but also in the international sphere. And that means, again, the court of public opinion. It's time for all of us to speak up, to speak out, to do something, and to hold our leaders, including in the Jewish organizations around the world that have become in cocoons, worrying about their budgets. We have to make them all accountable, but enable them, embolden them to be the leaders they've been elected to be. Edwin, thank you.
Richard, that was supremely valuable and supremely stated. It's just, ladies and gentlemen, the first teaspoon of what we're going to be undertaking this year with people like Richard Heideman and Nat Lewin and many others. You were speaking about the fact that the Justice Department, of all people, filed a statement of interest supporting UNRWA, which is loaded with inequity, loaded with hate, and loaded with terrorist affiliation, not only with Hamas, but also with Islamic Jihad and the Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Do you believe that the incoming Attorney General, which will be Pam Bondi, you believe that she will have the power to basically withdraw that statement of interest?
Yes, and she should, and she must. One more comment about it. You know, the United States enters into various treaties with countries. We have situations with countries where we give them immunity from prosecution. With the United Nations, there is an old treaty, but it doesn't extend on its face to UNRWA, an organization that was created. UNRWA operates as essentially a private, shall we say, charity. It has a board, it raises money, it has a pension plan for its employees. When you go, it used to be, they removed it for a while. I don't know if it's back. When you go on the UNRWA website as a U.S. taxpayer, we found in our preparation for litigation that my firm is about to file against UNRWA, so I'm biased here. We found that if you went on the UNRWA website and clicked as a U.S. taxpayer to make a contribution, it took you over to a U.S. 501c3 called UNRWA USA. They have no immunity. They process a lot of money from U.S. taxpayers, and then that money goes over to UNRWA. One last comment. UNRWA itself. It's been under attack for ages, not just because of the way it miscounts, but the hate that it teaches. The UNRWA curriculum was implemented in Gaza and elsewhere, and we have proof of students of UNRWA schools that have turned out to be terrorists. And then those terrorists, once they're arrested, once they're imprisoned in Israel, they're paid under the pay for slay program in what we would call incentives and rewards for murder, for maiming, and for terror. Unconscionable. And we saw on October 7th, and there's documented proof of many UNRWA activities involved with Hamas in Gaza. It includes members of the staff of their schools taking hostages, holding hostages, and it includes many other dastardly acts. I close with this, the hostages. Where has been the world outcry for the release of hostages, not just Israelis, not just Americans, but on October 7th, people were killed, maimed, or taken hostage from 42 different countries. Shame on every president, every prime minister, every foreign minister who failed or refused to this day to speak up for the civil rights, the human rights of those hostages. And why didn't they do it? Why didn't they do it? Because the victims are Israelis primarily. They are Jews. We are viewed by too many as too easy to attack, and we have to do something about it. Edwin, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Richard. Now we move to the most important element of this threat that was alluded to by Richard, the fuel that creates the flames, and that is the narrative, the false truth, the fractured truth, the forgotten truth. Here is where we embrace the need for commemoration, not just as an insistence on not normalizing evil, but also as a flashing red light to the world that when we say never again, we mean it. Our Holocaust museums, yes, they retain and display the record, but the only effort that places you, the person, in the place of those who, like my grandparents, trudged along the path and lined up for their own death. I refer to the unique March of the Living, which takes place each year at the Auschwitz death camp on Yom HaShoah, the American commemoration date. This year, the March of the Living will commemorate the 80th anniversary. I am the scholar in residence for the March, and here to tell us about this unique and fist-raised effort that keeps the fire alive from generation to generation as we fight degeneration after degeneration. I give you the international president of the March of the Living, Phyllis Greenberg Heideman in Washington, D.C. Phyllis, tell us of your fears for world Jewry and the hopes for this important pivotal March of the Living commencing April 21st of this year. Take the screen, Phyllis.
Edwin, first of all, I want to thank you very much for your commitment to history, your commitment to the present, and your commitment to the future. It is something that we hold dear. You are someone we hold dear, and we appreciate your helping us carry the torch of memory as we march together in the commemorative death march, the 3.2 kilometers between Auschwitz I and Auschwitz II Birkenau. Each year on Yom HaShoah, on Holocaust Remembrance Day, we gather from over 40 countries around the globe, between 5,000 and 12,000 people, depending on the world conditions that year. We gather en masse to say, we've had enough. Now, we have said this for 36 years. We have continued this incredible experience of marching on the blood-soaked soil, the soil of our ancestors, and 11 million others, in addition to the 6 million Jews. We don't want to forget that over 17 million human beings lost their lives at the hands of Nazi tyranny. And how did they do that? Why did they lose their lives? Edwin, they lost their lives because nobody cared. Because people became indifferent to hatred, to intolerance, to death. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of a world that has turned a blind eye to the vicious hatred of a people, our people, my people, your people. I do not want to be a part of that. So I spend most of my life fighting the fight to combat anti-Semitism, intolerance, hatred, bigotry, and all those evils that are that we face today. Today, we're facing terrible fires in California. I myself have friends who have lost their homes and their businesses, and my heart goes out to them. The fires that are raging in the minds and the hearts and the souls of people so willing to embrace hatred. It also is a fire. Embracing hatred is a fire that can overtake a society, and I believe it has. My fear is that our young people will begin to think that it's much easier not to defend our people. We are a people who fight for everyone. I will not name all the organizations and all the peoples, all the demographics that the Jewish people have come forth and defended. We have carried their torch. We have defended them. And what has been the result? They have turned on us completely. I'm not sure that at 77, almost 78 years old, I myself can understand how the Jewish people, who have brought so much to the world, given so much to society in all the stream, medicine, science, history, art, how we became so hated. I think it's a fire, and it's a fire that we must put out. How do we do it at the International March of the Living? We educate the next generation, not just to survive, not just to be descendants of survivors, but to be descendants of thrivers. We want to survive. We want to thrive. We want to continue the 3,000 illustrious history of our people. And we cannot do that by having task forces and having meetings and discussing amongst ourselves. Isn't it terrible? Isn't it terrible? Yes, it's terrible. 2025 will no longer wait. We no longer have the luxury to sit back and say this too shall pass. It will not. We say every year on Pesach, in every generation, they will rise up against us to defeat us. And, oh, look at us. We've survived. We've won. We've endured. We've outlived many other societies. Those societies did not have the internet on their side. They did not have the internet as the enemy. So while I believe in all the knowledge that is being espoused and being gleaned by people around the globe through internet access, I also believe that it is the single greatest breeding ground for hatred. When I was young and someone made an anti-Semitic statement at a cocktail party, 3 or 4 people heard it. Someone now makes an anti-Semitic statement, professes how terrible the Jewish people are and how we must die. 5 million people, not 5 million in a living room, 5 million people, maybe more, hear it in one fell swoop. If you hear hatred espoused long enough, you begin to believe it. Kristallnacht, the name of your program, Edwin. Kristallnacht is known as the night of broken glass. What I believe now is we are living through is the night and day of a broken society. So what we do at the International March of the Living is try to educate seniors in high school in particular, freshmen in college, to fight the fight, to stand strong, give them some background, some understanding that if we do not change the narrative of the past, if the equation is not changed, the result is going to be the same. And we are seeing today exactly what our ancestors saw in pre-war Germany, pre-war Poland, pre-war all over Eastern Europe. We are seeing that hatred has taken over, and it's very easy to assault, attack, even murder Jews and get away with it. Because there was no world outcry. There was no world outcry on Kristallnacht. And so it was a carte blanche for the Nazi Russia, the Third Reich, to say, look, nobody cares. Nobody cares if Jews have been slaughtered in the streets, their businesses smashed, their very sanity questioned. Nobody cares. Let's move on. And so became the onset of the final solution. So for some of us Holocaust educators, we believe that the defining moment for the success of the Holocaust was Kristallnacht. What I see going on in the world today is a precursor to exactly what could be the same end. None of us on this program, none of us listening, I'm sure, want to be a part of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to educate, enlighten, and embrace the next generation so that they will identify with the need to stand strong, to fight this fight, to join great people in this country, in this world, who have taken it to their chest and have taken it into their personal agenda, their corporate agendas, to fight this fight and do all we can to say, not never again. These things, these genocidal acts are happening all over the globe. We cannot say never again. What we can say is we've had enough. So never again is now. Now is the time to make a difference. We have partnered this year to commemorate the 80th anniversary, the glorious end of World War II and the liberation of the camps. We have partnered with the Eisenhower family and the Eisenhower Foundation in recognition of General Eisenhower as Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, his vision that 80 years ago, this general, this man from Kansas City, knew enough to say, to instruct the soldiers in under his command, please, you are commanded to document everything you see and are hearing. Why? Because there will come a day when deniers will come and say, this didn't happen. You and I are seeing it with our own eyes. We understand now that it has happened. Let's preserve the record for history. So we are partnering with the Eisenhower Foundation in the interest of education, in the interest of preserving the legacy of Dwight Eisenhower and the Allied Forces. And we will be introducing an initiative that is actually quite historic. It is another way to combat, to embrace another community, to embrace historians, to educate. It's what we do. Besides the marching, we educate because we understand. And this year we understand in particular that it isn't the time today for more flowery words and beautiful speeches. It's the time for action. It's the time for each one of us to roll up our sleeves. What do they say in the Army? All hands on deck. Band together and say, we just do not want the prophetic words of Edwin Black and others before him who said we are on a bad track. We're headed to a desolate, disparaging end. We don't want those words to become true. We want to refute that we're over. We're not over. We're not over. We have a lot more to bring to society. We have much more contributions to make to a better world for one and all. And given the opportunity to thrive, we will do so. We have to spend too much time on security, too much time and too much effort, too much money on protecting and defending ourselves. Imagine what we could do if we were free of the bondages that hatred places on us.
Phyllis,
So
Phyllis, is this not the last year to participate with actual survivors of the Holocaust due to the ravages of time?
I would say you're absolutely on target. Those survivors who would be able to march with us in the future would have been children at the time. Rabbi Lau himself, the former chief rabbi of the state of Israel, who has led every march since its inception in 1988, he himself is 88 years old. He was 8 years old when General Eisenhower and General Marshall liberated him. He remembers that day. He will tell that story to all who will listen. And yes, they will be children and they don't have the real memories. So we are looking at survivors and liberators who this is their last chance to come with us to Poland and stand strong together, arm in arm, liberators, survivors, descendants of both, and those who want to embrace the message that we're trying to deliver. It is imperative that each one of us become a torchbearer of memory, because when all is said and done, each one of us are survivors.
Phyllis, give us the website. How can people participate? www.motl.org. We welcome each and every one of you to join us. Erev Yom HaShoah is April 23rd. The March of the Living from Auschwitz I to Auschwitz II Birkenau is April 24th. We have a full range of days you can come, you can stay. We will take you around the country to show you the sites of death and destruction and what man's inhumanity to man can and has succeeded to purvey, and how important it is that today, 2025, we take a stand and say, not going to happen on our watch, never again. Thank you, Phyllis. MOTL.org. And if you forget where, just get in touch with the EdwinBlackShow.com. Now to our two contributing editor panelists. We turn to a learned attorney fighting for rights of people of every color and belief, but especially for the Jewish people. We call on a man born in the Holocaust who survived only to fight discrimination in America, where he ultimately thrived. For decades, he has prevailed in our courts, up to the Supreme Court 28 times. I give you none other than our contributing editor, Nat Lewin. Take the screen, Nat, and tell us about your fears and what you think we can do about it.
Thank you, Edwin. And thank you to Richard and Phyllis Heideman for their efforts and their very strong presentation today about the need for the Jewish community to stand up and fight for its existence, for its survival. Kristallnacht, after all, was an incident that happened when I was 2 years old. And in Poland, where I was born, my mother, Allah Shalom, knew and heard about it, and it really motivated her to make sure that as soon as Hitler and his Nazi gangs entered Poland, we would leave immediately. And I have managed over the years, as a survivor and a refugee from Poland, to live the American dream, really, as a lawyer in the United States. Now, you call this program Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht indeed is a concern that the Jewish community has to have. But it's important to recognize that there is a big difference between the motivations of Kristallnacht in 1938 and those who want to do today to destroy and eliminate Jews. Hitler and his Nazis viewed Jews as a race that was inferior and that had to be eliminated because of its inferiority. Today, we are endangered and hated not for inferiority, but because there is concern suddenly, now in our time, that Jews are too powerful, that Jews are too good. If one only listened today, this morning, to the funeral of Jimmy Carter, a man who everybody said was decent and had great character, but the decency did not extend to recognizing that the Jewish people were entitled to survive in their own homeland. Jimmy Carter, for all his decency and great character, viewed the Jewish state as an interference and as a problem for the world because Jews find it necessary to be strong and independent and survive in their own homeland. There is a big difference, therefore, today in terms of the dangers of another Kristallnacht. It is a concern over the fact that there are, according to people who are decent, good character, not sufficient restraint on what Israel has found necessary to preserve the survival of the Jewish state. Fortunately, the American electorate turned away and has turned away this form of decency and of good character, which claims that Jews have to live immediately adjacent to people who want to destroy them, that there has to be a two-state solution which endangers the future of Jews. It is important, as you said, that we have to fight it. And we have to fight it if we do by litigation. You said litigate, litigate, litigate. There are courts that are hostile, but there are courts that are sympathetic. And decency and justice in the United States, even if occasionally corrupted by judges whose political leanings are simply anti-Semitic and are an effort to destroy and jeopardize the Jewish community, there are judges and justices who recognize how important it is to preserve the rights of the Jewish community. There is now, unfortunately, very little publicity, a case in the Supreme Court that involves the question of whether there is personal jurisdiction over the PLO and the Palestinian Authority in cases in which there have been multi-million-dollar judgments rendered against them after proceedings in federal courts. And the Supreme Court has taken that issue and will be hearing it in this term of court. Unfortunately, there's been very little publicity given to that case, in which the Jewish community should be rising unanimously to tell the Supreme Court that certainly if Congress passed a law, which it did, which said that the federal courts in the United States could hear cases that are brought against organizations that have participated in the murder of American citizens abroad in Israel, that gives the federal courts jurisdiction over that litigation. And yet, lower courts have rejected that claim on very technical jurisdictional ground. And certainly one can hope that the Trump administration, with a new Solicitor General, will come in very forcefully on the side of those who say and have claimed that American federal courts have jurisdiction to render judgments against the PLO and the Palestinian Authority for their pay for slay, as Richard Heideman has commented, participation in this. But that's only one small part of this effort that has to be fought to recognize the rights of the Jewish community in the United States and all over the world. Even the threat of the arrest of Bibi Netanyahu should be challenged in the United States, not merely by legislation, but by executive order. Just as Joe Biden could issue an executive order that said that Jewish settlers in Israel were interfering with foreign policy if what they did is they tried to defend communities in what Biden calls the West Bank, and I call Judea and Samaria, that they can be financially penalized. In the same way, President Trump could issue an executive order that would say that anybody who tries to carry out international efforts or supports the international efforts to arrest Bibi Netanyahu or Gallant for their defense of Israel can also be penalized. That can be done by executive order. It doesn't have to take legislation to do it.
Well, Nat, I think that the good news is that that is one of the first executive orders that Trump is planning to issue in his list of 100 executive orders. I was very happy to hear that you're keeping your finger on these important litigational cases. I have two questions for you. One, 2 years ago, would you have believed me if I said it's time to start thinking about a Kristallnacht 2.0?
I have to say that given my own history and my own experience that drove my family to the United States, I have constantly had to be concerned about anti-Semitism, even though I did not suffer from it in the United States during almost most of my professional career. But when steps are taken, as for example in Ann Arbor, when an anti-Israel group decided that they were going to, almost on the steps of a synagogue, were going to meet every Saturday morning when people were coming to the synagogue with holding signs that attacked Israel and attacked Jews, I wrote very strongly against that and felt that a lawsuit could and should be brought. And the person who actually brought the lawsuit ended up being fined in a federal court, which was hostile to Israel. And I said originally that even that, ganging up in front of a synagogue and trying to intimidate those who were going to pray, was a threat to religious freedom in the United States. Unfortunately, there was very little support for that litigation. And as I say, very little opposition to the fact that the judge could penalize the plaintiff who brought that lawsuit. Clearly a justified lawsuit.
Well, I think that we're going to revisit all of that in the coming administration. Thank you very much, Nat, for everything you have done and everything you are doing now. So now we turn to one of the most lucid, incisive, and perceptive of our Jewish thinkers, a man who has distinguished himself in Holocaust education, not just as a reminder, but as a foreteller. I give you contributing editor Yossie Hollander in Orange County, California. Tell us you're safe, Yossie, from the fires that are racing across the Los Angeles area, and tell us how unsafe you believe the Jewish communities in the world are and what we could do about it right now.
So yes, we are safe. Thank you very much for your concern, and thank you to all my partners to this, I know for so many years for this group. By the way, it is an hour away from us. It is all arson, okay? Nothing is natural. And the question is of who are the arsons are. And that's currently the information I have. The problem is that every time in history when Jews were in great danger, it was because it was state-funded and organized. When it was just organization, we managed to work around them. And let's say all the different Nazi organization after World War II, we managed that pretty well as Jewish people. But now we're fighting a concentrated effort by state or state-like actors to work against the Jewish people and Israel as a whole. The number one, I would say, is actually probably, I don't want to rate them, maybe I'll just who they are. Qatar is one. They're funding most of the Muslim Brotherhood, most of the Jew hate around the world. The other one who has influence in the UN, in social media, in CNN, in Washington Post. They are the ones who are driving a lot of the anti-Israel agenda everywhere. And this is basically a tribe of 250,000 people that managed to drive the whole world crazy, and the world let them do it. So the person that drove through the market in New Orleans and the demonstrator a few hours after that in New York were from the same funding source and organization, and that's called Qatar. And I could not for the life of me understand why the Western world that just stand up and eliminate it. Second one is, of course, Iran, which is conducting a full-scale soft war against the US and against Israel and against the Jews. And unless we understand the scope of what they're doing everywhere around the world, South America, Europe, United States, I mean, they try to kill our own president, okay? We're looking at that phenomena, and we still let them just go by. I think this needs to change in the current administration. Another two countries that are very much in danger for the Jews in Israel are actually China and Russia. And the interesting thing is that most Chinese are actually pro-Semitic. They admire the Jewish people. But the Chinese have realized that encouraging anti-Semitism weakens the US, which is their strategic goal. Same thing with the Russians. A lot of the websites, a lot of the communication that you see around, and a lot of some initiatives come from Russia and China. We can trace it back. TikTok, for example, which promotes a lot of anti-Semitic thought and anti-Israeli thought among the young people, is totally directed and funded by China. So we need to understand that we're part of a broader game, a bigger game, but it is against the Jewish people. And as we wake up and join this fight to protect the free world and protect ourselves as well, we're not going to win. The fourth one is like state-like actors or state-size actor like George Soros. So the left in the United States has become dominated by anti-Semitism, by Palestinians, by anti-American thoughts. And unless we understand the threat for our existence from them, we're not going to win. Just to give you a recent report, it came out about, I think, 3 days ago. Apparently, most of the people in Wikipedia, the controlling people, the board, the treasurer, etc., are all basically current or ex-Open Society Foundation, OSF Foundation, which is Soros Foundation. So Soros has basically taken over Wikipedia with anti-American messages and anti-Jewish and anti-Israel messaging. And you can see it in the changing of all the different definitions throughout Wikipedia. Problem is that Wikipedia is now one of the main sources of ChatGPT and other AI systems, which are the main arbiters of so-called truth for the young people, and not just the young. So as we look at it, we have multiple forces, and we just need to fight each one of them in multiple ways, including the legal way.
Well, I think that your presentation really showed that your eye is not only on the organizations and the signs, but who is paying for the organizations and the signs, and specified Soros. And I believe that Soros will soon be investigated by the Justice Department, even though he was given the Medal of Freedom by Biden. And I believe that Qatar will soon be on the world stage for an examination of its role in what you have complained of. I can tell you that there are people listening to me now who know that I'm looking into Qatar, and I'm not done with them yet. And my findings are going to be astonishing. And I think that Qatar has the ability to reach into every household and into every organization in the United States. Right now, I want to ask you, Yossi, are you hopeful or not hopeful that the Jewish people are going to get over this current threat?
I am hopeful. I think we're getting organized, not as much as fast, not as good, not as everything that we are, but we also have some waking up in some of the world's Western societies. But the challenges we have are larger than ever. So I want to remind everybody, for example, that Trump was almost killed was missed by an inch. Okay, those things can happen any day, and they can change the world as we look at it. There is a good reason for some hope from the Trump administration, but we should understand the forces behind it are not stopping. So we may get some help during the next 4 years. We don't know what the results of the next election as far as legislation will be, and we don't know what 4 years from now. It could be that the radical leftists will take over America again, and then we'll be even again in deeper trouble. Because George Soros is the guy behind the people that drove this crazy policy.
Correct. So thank you very much, Yossi. And now it's my turn, and I want to leave nothing to the imagination in my discourse. It will soon be 80 years ago, but centuries and generations in the making, that we find ourselves on the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. We say liberation. We're fooling ourselves. Yes, courageous soldiers stumbled upon camps en route to some other place and broke those gates open, delivering freedom to the skeletalized unkilled amid the stench and horrors, and took the first trepidatious steps on the long road to justice and history. Yes, we have fooled ourselves. Scholars know that no camps were liberated, but only accidentally freed. No gas chambers were destroyed. No railroad tracks were bombed. And instead, we were offered nonsense about the lack of precision bombing during a war when carpet bombing was routinely employed by the Allies from Normandy to Dresden. The hundreds of thousands of printed leaflets warning Germans to cease their murder against Jews were not airdropped. The universally declared and blood-curdling December 17, 1942 admonition by the Allies, printed in every major newspaper in the world, announcing that Germany's, quote, bestial policy of cold-blooded extermination, close quote, of millions of Jews would, quote, not escape retribution. Yes, They were published, but those were merely noble words to be read by historians and printed in museum display windows, even as they were ignored by the perpetrators and those who had the power to take action. Let us remember that the League of Nations, which oversaw international peace and human rights since World War I, was active and on the ground every day during the 12-year Holocaust, from the first gasp of the Hitler regime on January 30th, 1933, right through the end of World War II in May of 1945, when humanity began sifting through the ashes and bones of 6 million Jews murdered by Nazi Germany and their many compatriots and allies right across Europe and the Middle East, from the killing fields of the Ukraine, where local citizens vastly outnumbered the actual German Einsatzgruppen and Nazis, mass shooting Jews in pits, right to the Baltic countries, to the vast international Arab military and support alliance led by the Mufti of Jerusalem, al-Husseini, and his Arab Higher Committee. For 80 years, scholars like me have been collecting the publicly available booklets, white papers, pamphlets, and news reports documenting how much people knew and how soon they knew it. Our documentation, our commemoration, our education, our museums, our candles flickering overnight, our defiant decision to live in our own land as free people, our integration into the progressive quietude of the nations of the world, advancing the scientific, commercial, and artistic musculature of all of humanity. Yes, that's true, but where are we? Where are we now? We're back to where we were. The advanced warnings of people like me, at first calling from the wilderness as the hopeful continue to hope for the best, but now today clamoring at the front steps of society as an international chorus of experts reluctantly agrees. It is getting ready to happen again. Yes, in America, new Trump leadership has forestalled the dispossession of the Jews, even as a roiling anti-Jewish hatred continues to cultivate, infect, and proliferate across the United States from coast to coast. Train forestalled, yes, but in America we recognize and worry that every delayed train can get back on track, just as was stated here. But more imperatively, we see the enlightened English-speaking lands of Canada, Australia, Ireland, the United Kingdom, where Jews are hunted down and singled out for disparagement, violence, and targeting that is becoming more ostentatious, more undisguised, and more reminiscent of the toxins that wafted across the world in the 1930s and the 1940s. And we are being sought out by mobs in our neighborhoods, which have been mapped, at our places of work, which have been mapped, at our delis, which have been mapped, at our synagogues, which have also been mapped, and at every expression of our liberty, all of it has been mapped. But this time, we will and must reject our own impulse to deny. We will look to the painful circular nature of our history, and we will and must take action to preempt and re-eradicate, I say re-eradicate, the forces of anti-Semitic hatred here and abroad. Can we even believe that Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL spoke at the Knesset and said, quote, "We need the kind of genius that manufactured Apollo gold pagers," these are the exploding ones, "and infiltrated Hezbollah for over a decade to prepare for this battle. We need the kind of courage," I'm quoting still, "that executed Operation Deep Layer inside Syria and destroyed Iranian missile manufacturing capabilities to undertake this mission. This is the kind of ingenuity," he said, "and inventiveness," he said, "that have always been a hallmark of the state of Israel, that has always been a characteristic of the Jewish people. I know we can do it," period, close quote. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to fight back without gloves and bring out the lawful knuckles. First, identify the threat, and let's be honest, It's not the stupid Klan with their burning crosses and their white sheets. It is the pro-Palestinian and Islamist crowd in chic clothing adorned with keffiyehs and their useful idiots who march behind them. It's not Islamophobia, ladies and gentlemen, to say this. It is reality. Muslims worldwide have wondrous relations with Jews in India, Azerbaijan, and throughout the Abraham Accords. But the Palestinian agitators are in a different class, experts at succoring the pseudo-academic and the historically anemic. The stupid transgender crowd who believe Palestine is a place that they could exist in for more than 10 minutes without being thrown off a roof. The climate change brat, Greta Thunberg, and her many followers, the factually deprived among our colleges and in our Congress who believe the fake news, the false narratives, the exaggerations and distortions of fact. Half the world's Jews live in Israel, a land they have inhabited since biblical times, yet they are called colonizers. But the Arab agitators that did colonize, that swept out of the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula to colonize the entire Middle East, North Africa, and parts of Asia and Europe. Here's a fun fact for colonization fans. 25 countries speak Arabic. 29 countries speak French, 21 countries speak Spanish, and almost 100 countries and territories speak English, but only one speaks Hebrew. It's Israel and my synagogue on Friday nights. The lies about genocide because we fight back. The lies about media control because we are involved in the arts. The lies about publishing control. Jews control almost nothing in the world media. Fake news, disinformation. This wasn't an invention of the recent political process. Jews have been fighting fake news about making matzah from Christian blood, about poisoning the wells, the fictitious protocols of the Elders of Zion and its proud sponsors, Henry Ford, the Ford Motor Company, the Nazi Party, and the Arab High Committee, which lionized Adolf Hitler as a God-given savior. Yes, we have been fighting fake news for generations, but I am not here just to complain. I have a bold solution. I want to ask Donald Trump to be as proactive against global anti-Semitism as he will soon be on neutralizing the international criminal courts with crippling economic sanctions by executive order. And this will be done by the end of the month. The prosecutor in The Hague and the rest of that kangaroo court won't be able to buy a ham sandwich with their MasterCard or cash a check because Donald Trump is going to issue those crippling sanctions. I say, Trump, you want Greenland? You want the Panama Canal? You want equity with Canada? Turn those tariffs and sanction powers against the nations that will not immediately subdue their anti-Semites and restore the calm to their Jewish communities. If we can fight for democracy, then why not understand that there is no democracy if the Jews fall to Islamofascism? On Friday, they came for the Jews, and the next morning they will come for the Christians. Trump, you have the power. If 4 dams can be destroyed in California for a smelt, then you can give a damn about the Jewish people worldwide, which are now being threatened everywhere by Palestinian mobs, not an Aryan mob or a white sheeted mob, but a Palestinian mob. And now it does not depend upon the context, as Harvard told us. If you want to be inscribed for the ages, you need to do more than up the contribution to NATO and scribble the words Gulf of America on your map. You need to take your place as a true deliverer. Sanction them, tariff them, EO them, exile them, defeat them. If you can alter the maps, you can alter the mobs. And now, with much more to be said another time, I turn it over to 1 minute each for our panelists to comment. Let me hear from Richard first.
Edwin, I'm speechless. Thank you. Yossie, Nat, Phyllis, thank you. I'm only going to comment on one thing. It's what I call immunity equals impunity. Yossie spoke about Qatar, and rightly so. Qatar has infiltrated our campuses, spent billions of dollars without reporting it to the U.S. Department of Education, and those campuses took the money without reporting it to the U.S. Department of Education. We can correlate between the hatred on campuses and the money that went into those campuses. We have work to do, but I must say, the State Department has a list of state sponsors of terror. There are only 4 countries remaining on that list. They include Iran, Syria, North Korea, and Cuba. Qatar is not on the list. Qatar, therefore, claims to have its immunity under the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, and you can only sue for certain things. I close with this. Let the United States Congress take steps to strip the immunity from Qatar, and they will stop acting with impunity toward Israel, toward the Jewish communities around the world, and toward the United States of America. They think they've bought us, and we have to let them know we are not for sale.
Well said. Well said. Nat, what's your 1-minute comment?
My 1-minute comment is relevant to Hanukkah, which we just concluded. We make a blessing on Hanukkah candles, Sha'osa nisim lavoteinu bayamim haim bazman hazeh, who did miracles for our fathers in those days, in this season. I think what we are seeing in terms of Israel and what Israel has managed to do currently justifies the blessing Sha'oseh nisim lanu v'lavotenu. By Sha'oseh nisim, he does miracles. Lanu v'lavotenu by Yamim Haim, not only then, uvazman hazeh, also today in our age. We should fight, but at the same time, we should recognize divine guidance and the fact that miracles are happening today by what Israel has managed to do with regard to those who have tried to oppose it and to destroy it.
Well said, Nat. Phyllis, are you still with us?
Thank you, Edwin. In conclusion, I would like to say that it is incumbent upon each one of us to do all we can to change the global narrative now. Time is of the essence. Rather than saying never again, I would like us to all feel not again. Not again in our time. So I welcome each one of you to join me in join us at the International March of the Living in trying to do all we can to preserve not again, a better future for one and all.
Well said, Phyllis. Yossi, what's your minute comment?
So just everybody said, okay, so what are we going to do? Okay, and since I'm here with lawyers around me and litigation is part of the subject, so one of the new organization I helped create recently, it's called the Samson Fund. And the idea behind it is to concentrate financial resources, serious financial resources for litigation. So our first goal is to get the first 18 million, we're first close to it. And the idea is to fund litigation strategically, help fund litigation that cannot be funded, and help where we think we can in terms of litigation and legislation related to it. And a lot of the great Jewish donors have joined that effort. And if it is successful over the next couple of years, with results, I think we'll put together a $50 million effort on it. So I think we need to organize something like that on almost every aspect of fighting. Because if we just let it kind of every organization doing a little bit more here and there, we're not going to get there. The forces against us are too big.
All right, well, we're all going to be there shoulder to shoulder with you. Let's go to questions. We only have time for a few. Here's a question from Newton, Mass. It's how do we remove the student threat from our campuses? And I believe there's 2 things to do. One, the foreign students immediately revoke their passports, get them out of here. Our friend Mr. Holman will be happy to take the lead on that. Second of all, students who have federal loans, federal financing, those students, if they are involved in law breaking, in non-academic activities, obstructing the campus, anti-Semitic stuff, revoke their loans, get them off the campus. And let me add a third thing. I think that we should immediately stop all funding to any colleges which are tolerating and creating an infrastructure for anti-Semitic or hate of any kind. I know that I worked with Nathan Lewin and others in Congress years ago on this project. It never quite got off the ground, but I think we now have a greater audience. Yossi, how do we get the students off these threatening students off our campus?
I think the issue is not the students, because the issue is the faculty and the administration. Okay, students come and go every year. I think basically if administrations are forced to keep our laws, nothing more than that, and the only way to force them and the only way they understand is tax their endowment or confiscate it, which by Title VI, I believe we can do that. I think that all Trump needs to do, by the way, on the issues of Title VII, Title IX, and Title VI, is confiscate, let's say, Columbia or Yale endowment as damages, okay, which I believe can be done by an executive order, okay. It will be challenged in court, etc., but it doesn't matter if it's challenged in court. That will be the end. Every university board will start straightening the university.
Let's hear from Richard on that.
I want to add something. You know, at the University of Michigan, and I'm an alum, and that spoke about the situation involving the synagogue that was blocked and how the courts handled it. But on the campus, in the quad, the students have been encouraged under the spirit of free speech to support Apartheid Week, to block Jewish students from here and from there, to castigate them and to threaten them. I think one of the things we need to do is embolden, first of all, the Jewish students, second of all, the students who aren't haters of our community, but thirdly, we need to threaten those students who are using free speech as a cover for their hatred. And one way to do it is just what happened actually in Ann Arbor. One of the leaders, maybe the president of the student body, was expelled by the students themselves for their hatred. If we can embolden the kids on campus to rise up, speak out, and do something for themselves, they themselves can make a difference in turning it around. And then they can go into the classroom, and instead of sitting against the wall, they can confront those faculty members Yossi just spoke about. But we have to redo the way we have not provided sufficient leadership training for our young people through the high schools and into the colleges.
Well, that's where Stand With Us comes in. That's where the Brandeis Center comes in, and many of the other organizations that you are quite aware of, Richard. Now, we have a question here from the Watch Party in Chicago. What is happening in Lebanon? There's been a sea change in Lebanon. I recently got a phone call from one of my contacts there. I work very closely with the Maronite community, not only in Lebanon, but in the Lebanese Maronite diaspora worldwide. Hezbollah, which had a grip on every aspect of governmental and societal activity as a proxy for Iran, Hezbollah has been weakened to the point where it is no longer a dominant force. Syria is building a wall between Iraq to stop the Iranian infiltration. They had an important vote for president a few hours ago. And General Ayun, who's with the Christian Maronite community, was elected president. And I'm told that we may be in for a sea change in Lebanon, and it may include not only the neutralization of Hezbollah, but possibly even a joining of the Abraham Accords. That's what I was told by my sources who are very active in the community. Yossi, comment quickly.
So the problem is that forecasting in the Middle East is the most inexact science that exists anywhere. And I don't think anybody right now knows that, of course, the development of the weakening of Hezbollah and also cutting off its supply route from Syria is a very positive change. Can Lebanon, first of all, rehabilitate itself because its economy is in ruin totally? And can Christian come back to live there? Moderate Shiite can come to live with it. I think it remains more and more, it's more an internal issue for them. I think the more they'll be able to stabilize their society, the better chances will be that they'll have some better relations with Israel. But I think I wouldn't, after decades of infighting and external interference, I wouldn't now put my money on it. I would still be very, very careful.
Thank you, Yossi. We're out of time, everybody. I want you to hold for my closing word of wisdom, just 2 minutes away. But first, I want to thank my very knowledgeable guests who shared their wisdom: Richard Heideman, Phyllis Heideman, Nathan Lewin, and Yossie Hollander. I also thank my talented international team, including Eve. She's listening right now from New Jersey. Holly in Nashville. Enjoy your water. Rebecca in the Philippines. Christine in Indiana, as well as many others in numerous additional cities around the world. My team, each of them, is comprised of very dedicated people. We all owe them. I'll see everyone back here in 2 weeks at 3 p.m. ET. You want to be a friend of the Edwin Black Show? Please, I need assistance. Go to the edwinblackshow.com/support. Keep me independent. You want to hear me in person? Watch my website for events. Consult my events page at edwinblack.com. Until then, head over to any Barnes & Noble in the USA or any Amazon, Walmart, iTunes, Google Books, Kobo, or Audible.com platform in 190 countries across this roiling, toiling, boiling planet, where you can find any of my 225 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust and Banking on Baghdad. You want an autographed copy? Hit edwinblack.com and click books. Get access alerts to participate live in future shows at theedwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show in about 3 weeks, and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show and click the notification button like many tens of thousands of others have. You'll love them. We put new ones up each week, produced by my bold international crew. You can follow me at Edwin Black Book on that thing called X, as well as that thing called Facebook. And now for my closing word of wisdom. You must decide whether you will take from humanity or give to humanity. Whatever you do, history will record your decision. I'm zooming out from our nation's capital. Bless all of you. Pray for all that will soon unfold.